Hello there, this is Christy Lewis at the Lakeport branch of the Lake County Library, and today I am here with a whole bunch of female speculative fiction authors. I love that female authors are getting more attention in the speculative world because I know that in the past there were a lot more books published by males than by females. I wanted to highlight a couple females that I have really enjoyed in the past. I am more familiar with like older female authors rather than the brand new ones. A lot of the new ones are writing in the young adult genre or are writing like more politically based speculative fiction just from my limited experience of the modern speculative fiction genre. So I'm covering some authors that are fabulous and not necessarily forgotten, but I feel like they deserve some love. So if you want to order any of these, make sure that you copy and paste their titles. I have them all listed down below, and go order them on the library catalog, which is also linked down below. And if you are enjoying these videos, make sure to give them thumbs up in the corner there and hit the little bell notification if you want to be notified anytime we make a new video. Make sure to subscribe, and let's jump into it. I actually don't know that much about Anne McCaffrey. I just know that there's a lot of people that love her books. They are technically sci-fi, but they feel more like fantasy. They are set on another planet, however, so the author herself was very adamant that her novels be called science fiction. So these are science fiction set on another planet, and it's all about dragons and dragon culture and the humans who ride the dragons. You may have heard of the Dragon Riders of Pern. That is this series. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it because it is famous, but I just wanted to throw that out there. She is one of the most famous female speculative fiction authors out there, and I think she does do a good job kind of detailing the dragon like mating rituals and all that stuff. Like, it really feels like the dragons are real creatures with real anatomy and mating rituals and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool. My battery was suddenly running out, so I hope that I finished that. I don't remember the last thing I said, but regardless, Anne McCaffrey, Dragonflight, there we go. Next, we have Star Wars Resistance Reborn. This is actually a Rebecca Roanhorse book, and that's why I picked it up, because right now she has some very popular books and a short story that has been going around BookTube among my friends. I'll put the one here that everybody is currently reading on BookTube. It's a very hyped up book right now. I would really like to read her at some point. She is a First Nations author. I'm not sure which nation she has bloodlines from, but that's just really cool. She does talk about the First Nation experience in the short story that I have read from her. So if you're a Star Wars fan, this might be the one for you, or maybe one of these other ones. I hope you'll check her out. I've just been hearing nothing but good things about her, so that's why I mentioned her. Let's also talk about Connie Willis. This is Crosstalk. This is the only book that I've actually read from her, and from what I hear, this is kind of like her lightest one. This one is about the effects on the mind if suddenly you had Twitter in your brain. And controlling that brings our protagonist into contact with another young man who knows exactly what she's dealing with. He's dealt with it himself. I really enjoyed it. I just ripped through it, tore through it. The romance is really fun. She's written some historical time travel or something like that. To Say Nothing of the Dog was one of them. So she's actually famous. She's won like several awards. Like, I don't know if it's Hugo or Nebula or both, but this compares her comedy to P.G. Wodehouse, which I think I would agree with. I've just been reading P.G. Wodehouse, and I do remember finding this pretty funny. Highly enjoyable and recommended if you like a little romance in your life. Another author we should definitely talk about is Robin Hobb. Now, I read her original Farseer trilogy, and it was so literary and beautiful and well put together and very absorbing. The characters in that story are just fantastic. You see all of the characters through the main eyes of the young man who is coming of age through the course of that first trilogy. And his name is Fitz. He is called Fitz by everyone around him because his father was not married to the woman that birthed Fitz. So his father, though, was a member of the royal family. So Fitz is brought into the royal family and raised to be their personal assassin. So it's a really hard life. It's a very heartbreaking series, but there are lots of animal friends. And like I said, it's beautiful and very literary. So if you're into literary fantasy, you might want to check that out. Now, the second series after the Farseer series is called The Live Ship Traders, and that is where a lot of people find their stride. They say that that one is their favorite trilogy. I personally could not finish that trilogy. I started it and I just wasn't enamored with it. It wasn't literary like the original trilogy, unfortunately, and the characters just didn't feel very realistic to me personally. But I know that I am an outlier. I was so shocked when I had that opinion because all of my friends love it. So I think probably the imaginative qualities are there, and if you don't really care about that literary flair, you might really enjoy it. Because like I said, I know like one other person who didn't. Anyways, this is the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, which I believe comes after the Live Ship Traders trilogy, or maybe after a trilogy in between there. We do apparently return to Fitz, and the fantasy is kind of low magic, especially in the first trilogy. It's very setting based. It's based in Buck Keep, which is a settlement on the ocean, and like a lot of it is just very political and not very magical. The magic is pretty understated. You don't really understand it. So I don't know if it continues that way or if we get to know more about magic in the later books, but just holding this makes me want to go back into it because the first trilogy really is worth it if you can handle the pain and the suffering. Next, let's talk about Elizabeth Moon. This is Engaging the Enemy, and I have not read this particular one. I've read two other books by Elizabeth Moon. One is Once a Hero, and it's about the heroine Esme Squeeza, I believe, and she has some trauma in her background that keeps coming out and bothering her in these terrible, horrendous nightmares that she's been suffering, and she realizes she's gonna have to deal with that psychological thing if she's ever gonna step out and really be comfortable in her chosen career, which is a military career. Now it turns out she has all of these leadership qualities that she could be taken advantage of if she can get a handle on her nerves and her nightmares. But again, she has to face that psychological trauma that is rooted in her childhood, and she is just a fascinating character. I love her struggles, how she has to kind of come into leadership, and it's not just an easy thing for her. She has to deal with her own issues before she can really be a leader, and she's kind of looked down on in her particular culture because she is a woman. But when she gets into the military, it's a little bit less rigid in its gender roles, and people keep encouraging her, you know, why are you doing all these kind of like easy jobs that anybody could do when you could be doing really great stuff? There's like a plot that comes to fruition somewhere in the book where she has to take control, and it was just a really good sci-fi story. I really enjoyed it. And the other book that I read from her was like really different. It wasn't character driven at all. It was a survival tale. Cold Welcome is what it was called, and it's about a woman who lands on a frozen planet and realizes that she has been sabotaged and she's gonna have to try and survive. And I think she has to like save the lives of people around her. I think she has like a team with her or something. And it's really quite harrowing. I tore through that when it first came out. Completely different though, like I said, it was like a thriller, you know, survival on an ice planet, which was really fun and very different. So either her style has changed a lot in between Once a Hero and Cold Welcome, or she's just a very versatile writer. Kind of like Robin Hobb, it's like I can't tell, is she just a versatile writer or has her style changed as she's been trying to put out more books? I've noticed that too with some authors. They'll start out really strong and beautiful and I love their work, and then they become more genre specific as they try and pump out books on a fast schedule, and I start enjoying them less. So I'm hoping that that's not the trend with Elizabeth Moon, and even with Robin Hobb. Anyways, enough chattering about that. Moving on. A lot of times in the past, women's fantasy and science fiction was actually published as young adult or children's stories, even though they are sometimes about young women who are actually above those ages and who are dealing with adult issues. They were just published as children's books because they were very readable, and I don't know, maybe just because marketers didn't think that they could sell a book written by a woman to what they thought was a male-dominated readership. That's how I understand it anyways. I'm not like an expert in this, but I did want to be a science fiction and fantasy writer at one time. I have researched it a little bit. Anyways, I think that's fascinating. I'm glad that they were in the children's room when I was a kid because that meant I got to read them. I had great access to lots of great fantasy writers as a child. One of those writers was Tamara Pierce. This is another one of those writers who I adore. Her first 4 quartets in the Tortalan universe. Tortal is her imaginary land that she created, and this is probably my favorite quartet by her. It's called Protector of the Small. This is the last book, Lady Knight. It's about Keladri of Mindolin as she is a page and then a squire, And then when she's a page, she's given a first test, which none of the boy pages have to deal with. So that's the whole thing that she has to deal with. She's the first known female to go through the process of becoming a knight. So she has to pass this first test with the trainer of the pages. And the second book is about her journey as a page. And the third is her journey as a squire. And the fourth is her first big test as a knight. And I loved all of these books growing up. They're wonderful. They're so detailed. There's wonderful creatures in it. There's very detailed magic in some of the other quartets. This one doesn't have a lot of magic because Keldry really just has to get by on blood, sweat, and tears. Although she doesn't cry very much. She has a very calm demeanor because she lived in the Yamani Isles for most of her childhood, it's like an Asian-inspired place, which the author Tamara Pierce loves Asian teachings and practices. So she just has a lot of self-control for a 10-year-old. So she's not a very emotional person, at least outwardly, but she does have a very rich inner life. And I just really adored her as a kid. She was such a role model to me. She got me into running and health and exercising my body. And I give her all the credit for that because she was just such a role model for me. So these are wonderful, wonderful books that follow her from growth into adulthood. And I highly recommend them. The other books by her that I love are the Immortals Quartet and the Lioness Quartet, which maybe is written with a bit less skill, but it is more groundbreaking for the time that it was published. It was one of the first traditional fantasy hero's quest stories with a female as the lead. And Alanna the Lioness, what's her name? She disguises herself in the first book to try and become a knight, and it follows her as she becomes a knight and on her like first couple years as a knight. It's similar to this one, except Kel everybody knows that she's a woman. So just that one change makes a huge difference in their stories. Also, Keldry has no magic and Alanna does have magic. She's a very powerful mage. The Immortals Quartet is also about a mage, but a different kind of mage entirely, and you have to read the story to find out why, but I love that one. It has a very swoony romance. I love the romance in the Immortals Quartet. It's one of my favorites. Although the Alanna the Lioness books also have a great romance. So I feel like I've been going on and on about these, but that's, like I said, because they're my favorites, so I could go on about them for days. And finally, the last series that I wanted to talk about is actually a similar situation to Tamara Pierce. I think maybe her first book actually might have been considered a children's book, but it's clearly for a slightly older age group as the story progresses, as the characters age. So this book is The King of Attolia by Megan Whalen Turner. And she just consistently puts out fabulous political, historical fantasies. This series is Grecian inspired. I don't think she's actually written any other series. So pretty much all her books are Grecian inspired. She does have a book of short stories which have a diverse array of inspirations. This is my favorite. However, the other two before these are also wonderful. All of them are centering around this character of Eugenides. And in this one, he has married his lover and become king. And it appears that he is not prepared for this responsibility. He has a king's guardsman who is guarding him all the time and is like, this guy doesn't even know what he's doing. He's way out of his depth, and it's just painful to watch from his perspective because the king just gets embarrassed again and again and again, and it seems like he's really having a hard time adjusting to rule. Now, one of the nice things about this is that the narrator isn't exactly trustworthy. I forget what that's called, but you can't trust the narrator because it's a very subjective narrator. It's very, very gripping. I really love the series. It's so swoony and romantic. Highly, highly recommend. I really hope that you will check out some of these authors, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know down below if you're gonna order any of them. If you have any recommendations of speculative fiction authors for us to check out here at the library. We always love to hear your thoughts, and it does help our channel if you do like and subscribe and leave us comments, so please do that. And don't forget to order any of these books that sounded interesting to you. Okay guys, I'll talk to you next time. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.